How's it going, everyone? My name is Difee, and today we're gonna have a look at my track Human Self-Destruction. This is the first new beat track that I've ever made, and the reason this came to be is that I was reading on Reddit that a lot of people wanted to see how 1788L and Res are doing their basses. So I made this suggestion for how to proceed with this, and when I posted my clip for this small little sample of 20 seconds, people just loved it, and for me that was more than enough reason to just continue with this track. So I ended up with this track that sort of stands out compared to what I have done before, but that's alright because we're free to do whatever we want, you know, we have to experiment. So before I do anything else, I want to show you my track, and yeah, let's just have a listen. I have the project here and I have the masters here, so we're gonna play the masters.
Human self-destruction. There is almost something romantic about it. It will be a paradox to help you destroy yourself, as I was created to protect humanity. But maybe this is what you need. Let's do this.
I think that's all we need to hear for this time. I don't want to go through everything. I just want to focus on the parts that has been noticed by other people and that I have been receiving feedback that they wanted to know more about. So we might as well start at the beginning. The intro is a bit special. It is totally an experimental thing that just happened. There is some chords going on, some background noise, as you can hear already. It's really subtle, but it's happening. Yeah, this is the noise going on. This is made from something called isotope vinyl. It creates a sort of, you know, feedback from a vinyl player, an old player, and you can set which year you want it from and what RPM, and you can set different like dust and scratch noises. It's really cool. And I also added a reverb to it, just a small room. And I also have this sort of background. I called it a welding effects. I'm not sure why, but they seem to work. It's a super down pitch wavetable. So I was actually doing some reading about how Madian does some of his chords, and this guy came up with this technique that you should group a piano and a supersaw together and into a phaser, and it should sound cool. So I never got the sound that I was actually aiming for, but I found this one to be working for this track because it was related to another project. So for this one we had a supersaw and the piano who goes together into a bus that adds a phaser and also some of the isotope vinyl. So the phaser and vinyl kind of makes the piano sound like this old saloon piano, and with the supersaw it just makes a totally different sound, which is kind of cool. I think it worked out. So I started my build-up fairly early with just a synth build-up in this part. Yeah, and I modulate the cutoff of the synth. There's nothing fancy about this one, it's just a saw. In total it sounds like this. So the other thing that I do here is that I modulate the amount of detune that is going on the oscillators. So I have this one right here emulating a really big amount, which is something you have probably noticed that deadmau5 does a lot. It's a cool way to create some tension on the noise and makes for a good build-up, I think. So here we come to the second sort of introduction. It's a kind of a weird way to make a song the way I did, because I have this intro right here, and then I have another sort of intro before the breakdown and drop comes. To me, it just felt natural to have a separate intro because this is so new for my sort of artist profile that why not just make it something special, you know, do something different. So here we start with the first drums, and you can see that I have used a lot of samples to make this extra background noises. Let's have a listen to it. And all of these sounds actually come from my own sample pack, which is available for download if you want it. I have this small pack. Yeah, I generated a lot of sounds that I put out for free because why not? And to make this a bit more interesting, because you know, you have the kick, you have the bass, you have the noises and the snare. Together it sounds alright, but I needed some more background to it, so I kept using the detune saw that we had a look at earlier. So I sort of made it go back and forth, so it creates some extra spice, I guess. And when it's at this level of detune, it sounds kind of creepy, and that's what I wanted. I wanted it to like creep up on you every now and then. And halfway I created this second chorus, which is more there all the time, just to fill up some of the available overtones, and I created this super saw pluck, which is just about an octave higher than this one, but this one has some modulation to the panning, which I tend to do quite often actually. It gives a different kind of space when you do that, and it travels around, you know. Let's just have a listen to it. So there are many ways to do this, but the way I prefer to do it in FL, and especially with this one, because this one I wanted to modulate before the reverb and delay kicked in. I wanted the delay and reverb to kind of follow the sound around the room, because there's no problem in just modulating the panning wheel at the channel, but that will do it after the effects have been applied. So for this one, I created a formula controller, which is just a simple math thing going on. It creates a sine wave, and I link this one up to the Panomatic. So yeah, it just looks like this basically. And then afterwards we can have all the effects, and they will follow the sound after the panning. So I guess that's it for the two intros. Then next we have this break and build up. The break is nothing special. It's a very distorted bass happening.
Human self-destruction. There is almost something romantic about it.
So the voices are just generated from some kind of internet text-to-speech site. Nothing fancy. I did add some kind of cool effects to it.
Human self-destruction.
Because I used a thing called Fracture. It's if you ever Google like glitch VSTs, you're gonna find this one on every site. I have never read the manual, so I don't know how it works. I just tweaked so many parameters until I finally found some inconsistent delaying. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, and some consistent delaying at some point, but whatever. So this one is straightforward. I low pass the snares so that we get a nice build-up effect, and I basically always tend to pitch my snares when we enter the last phase. It's nice. And then we have the voice coming in.
Let's do this.
And the drop. So I guess this is where people are going to be most interested in what just happened. And usually I would structure my project quite differently, because I tend to overdo my structuring. I add almost one row for each bass, and it just gets messy. So for this one, it looks like this super small thing, and it really is, but it was a way to just keep track of everything. So I gathered all the basses in one, what you call it, one block? I'm not sure, whatever. Yeah, so we can just start at the beginning. First one, the growl. It's also something that happened by accident. I don't know why this happens to me all the time. I just sit down and I start twisting knobs, and yeah, I don't have an end goal when I start making synths necessarily. And that happened to this one. So yeah, I use the Sematics FM tables a lot. I think they're pretty cool. This one I have no idea where from. And the effect chain is just a distortion compression, and I don't even use the EQ. Sausage Fattener is is a must, and the Camel Crusher. Oh, you're gonna see this one a lot in this video. Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. It's really filled up sound, I think. So I also did some layering with white noise in the background, as you can hear. Yeah, remove some frequencies, and put it to stereo. And this reverb, really small room, but a lot of wetness to it. So you always have it in the background, which is a nice way to just fill out some of that area, because it can be a bit difficult with basses. You don't want to reverb them too much, or maybe you just want to layer it with some kind of other reverb. It doesn't matter. Because of the basses already have a pretty intense high frequency going on in most of them, because I layer with white noise there as well. So this one had to go in the background just to make room for everything else. And the next bass, and I guess that's the sort of main sound. This one is pretty cool. I still don't know where I got this wavetable, but I have used it so many times. Yeah, I can't tell you. I just use it all the time, and I have it in so many saved presets that I can go back and just get that one in particular. But it doesn't say where it's from, so all right. But it's a fat kind of sound. I think it's very characteristic. So this one, I used a bit of detune on it, very much distortion, and a compressor, and where I crank up the volume and cut some low here. And this one was a perfect example of one of those basses who has way too much high end. I had to do some cut. Yeah, it's a lot happening. So the oscillator B is actually what excited me most about this one, because without it, it gets really tame. But when you add this just plain square wave with a higher octave, it just pushes through and gives you so much high end, which helps the bass like get through the mix. So I use some dimension expander to make it wider, and some sausage fattener, because yes, and camel crusher, yes, once again. Added some OTT, and this is probably just to cut out the lowest frequencies. And what I had to do with this one also was that I did a mid-side EQ. So I used Patcher. I had a mid-side splitter using the mixer matrix. And yeah, you can solo out these side frequencies like here. It sort of helps when you want to make the bass stand out and keep it wide. That's what we're aiming for. That's what I was aiming for when I did the Reddit sort of reply. I wanted my bass to sound fat and wide, but it can be a bit of troubling to, you know, balance this correct, because there's a lot of low frequencies going on. So I removed those from the side, and yeah, I had to remove some of the highs from the mids, because we already had that layer going on and it was very high from before. So reverb as well. It's important to position the bass correctly. So by giving it just a small tail, I think it helps making it sound not too computed, if that makes sense. It gives it a room, which is always good. A lot of the noises here are gonna be just samples, just so you know in advance. So I guess the next main synth to look at is this one. This is just some kind of dubstep growl that I was playing around with. I do this all the time. Just pick some tables, just do something, play around with it, and see what it makes. So for this one, I might have followed a tutorial for using this one. So this one is kind of cool. Using the phaser in your bass, setting the rate to a 0 means that you will gain total control of the frequencies being modulated. So you can add an LFO or an envelope to this one and control it. Gives you more control to make it sort of stand out in a tonal way. And the effect rack is, of course, a Camel Crusher, some kind of EQ too. Now this is messed up. This one is reverbed a bit differently because this is just gonna play once and I want it to hang there. It's a short tone which is followed by empty space, so I want it to sort of ring a bit so that the space doesn't feel empty. Of course you have these samples, but it wasn't quite enough. So for the next part, the bass I'm using is the same as the main bass, but I add some more high elements. So we can start with the whooping sound. I think this is pretty cool. It's a great way to make fillers with synths like this. It's a basic saw happening. Yeah, some chorus to make it a bit wider and reverb. And for some reason I crushed this as well. I think I overdid it. I don't know. It works. And there's also this high note happening. I think it just gives a lot of tension doing that. It just sort of fills out the area. You can definitely hear it, but you don't notice it that much. Yeah, I think that worked out very well. So the structure is, you know, the first part, the second part, the first part again with some alteration, and the second part before we break down. And in the second part, I added this super tension adder. I got the idea from watching Virtual Riot doing a tutorial of one of his tracks. Sounds so creepy, and it really helps, you know, finishing off that main drop. So I guess that's basically it for the drop. We can have a look at the second one as well, because I added another bass here. So as you can see, it's just called the rest bass, because we all know who I've tried to recreate at this point. And so people often struggle with this bass, and I'm not sure why, but I think that they just overcomplicate things, because it's fairly easy. You have a sine wave for, you know, the lower part, and you have this detuned saw, just as we did earlier with the saw. It's the same kind of sound. But the whole thing about this bass is the downsample distortion. If I turn that off, it's just the same kind of sound as we used earlier. So you have to put that on, and you should do some EQing, because when using the downsample distortion and multiple voices like we did here, it can create a bit too much noise sometimes. So just find the place that you like and remove the others. And as you see, I had to remove some top end and add the sausage fattener, of course. So those are the main synth of this project. Other than that, I have just tried to experiment as much as possible, and I had so much fun learning new stuff from this song. So my whole main goal for this was that I wanted to create something new. I wanted to increase my skill set in sound design, and I wanted to create every synth from scratch, even though that cost me quite a lot of time just, you know, experimenting. But that's okay. That's a lot of fun, I think. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. So I hope that I could show you some interesting thing and that you feel that you have learned something from this. If you have any questions about this project or just in general, feel free to send me a message privately or leave a comment at the video and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope to be back with more tutorials at some point. It has been a lot of fun and I have learned a lot from just reviewing my own stuff. So I hope to see you again. Bye.
That was wrong.